All right, here we go with take two of Mies van der Rohe and International Style. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from the Abrams Guide for you. On the good glasses. All right, so in 1932, Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock curated architecture, an international exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. The style it documented, named after the accompanying book, is considered the purest expression of 20th century modernism. And I would capitalize that with that M. Evolved from the concepts of the Bauhaus masters, especially Walter Gropius, Mies van der Rohe, Marcel Breuer, and their contemporary Le Corbusier, who was originally Swiss, worked in France. International style architecture celebrated geometric form with modern materials. Its buildings were severe, flat-roofed structures of steel and concrete, with broad swaths of window and without ornament, or at least without traditional ornament. A revolt against traditional architectural styles. It launched a new look with interiors that were open, light-filled, and furnished with objects that followed the tenets of functional design. So again, we have a style that is a rejection and a revolt against traditional architectural styles, and that is referring to neoclassical or classical. International style was embraced as a statement of modernity for the rectilinear, curtain-walled corporate headquarters that dotted the American landscape in the boom years after World War II. It was ideally suited to the demands of post-war construction, both economical and efficient. It provided maximum floor space and facilitated the use of machine-made modular elements. So factory production is here to stay. Modular units, making concrete, precast concrete panels in consistent dimensions. The standardization makes it more efficient and less expensive to build. So when you get into a lot of custom work, that gets into something more expensive. And when you're building a very tall building, you have to keep that under control. So this was also, international style was also applied to residential architecture, and that's a place where Mies van der Rohe, some of his best known projects are residential projects. All right, and finally in this introduction to international style in the book, emphasizing structure and functionality rather than warmth and creature comforts. That's Victorian, meaning the warmth and creature comforts to me refers to Victorian. The international style failed to gain the acceptance in residential design that it did for office structures, such as the celebrated Seagram building in New York. The paradigm of 20th century corporate culture. It was more successfully applied to high-rise apartments than to single-family residences, except perhaps for the innovative California home designed by Rudolf Schindler and Richard Neutra, precursors of the casual split-level homes of mid-century modernism. Okay. International style was considered passé by the 1970s. Its principles were too demanding to sustain in the face of an interest in historicism and the pendulum swing of fashion. As one young architect in the 1960s remarked, "What's the matter with an arch?" So international style and modernism dominated for decades. And while it started out as this, kind of a purist revolt, it ended up becoming an established and conservative and constricting style. All right. So there he is, Mies van der Rohe, photographed in the MR chair, one of the many different chairs he designed. He was better with furniture than Frank Lloyd Wright. A little bit about Mies van der Rohe. He grew up in Germany, from northwestern Germany. Really not classically trained. He seemed to always have a bit of a chip on his shoulder about the fact that he started out working, I believe, apprenticed to a stonemason or brick manufacturer, and so he made his name in architecture really by just determination. And he had a lot of really good and interesting ideas. Coming at the problem from the same, I guess, the same problem as some of the other more technically trained architects, but maybe from a different direction. Okay, so 19th century German neoclassical architecture was really led by this guy, Carl Friedrich Schinkel. There was a term in German called Schinkelschüler, which means a student of Schinkel. He was considered the standard, and he was considered the model to follow for German architects. You can see the Ionic capitals on this. This is the ancient museum for like antiquities, and it is appropriately a neoclassical structure. So some early work by Mies van der Rohe shows the influence of Schinkel. And Schinkel's influence lasted past his death. So this is very early for Mies van der Rohe in the teens before World War I. And he also started to experiment with the taller steel frame and concrete office buildings. He was really one of the first, possibly the first person to imagine the modern office building, like it or not. Here's another very interesting project. These are unbuilt, but this is, you can see that structure on the inside, and the outer wall is glass, and the outer wall is referred to as a curtain wall. And so a glass curtain wall is what, is how you would refer to that outer wall that is all windows. Another drawing for Glass Skyscraper project. Here are some site plans for some of his buildings. Very, interesting, unusual. Not the way buildings were being built by most other people. Here is so Philip Johnson, the guy who organized the International Style Exhibition. He was an architect, and he designed some tall buildings like this Pennzoil Place in Houston. And this is sort of like these are like the followers of Mies van der Rohe. This one in Chicago. So this is what, as we all know now, this is what happened with large commercial architecture. You can build these enormous buildings, lots of square footage, very tall. And these towers, these do seem to have something in common with some of these early Mies van der Rohe drawings. And these architects were students of Mies late in his career, teaching in Chicago at IIT, and that is one of the really does appear to be based on one of those early drawings of his. I am Pei. Another renowned architect. And so here, this idea of the rectangle, or like rectilinear architecture, and rectilinear is when you use right angles, and right angles are it's more efficient, less expensive to build. And you can see here in this project for this brick country house, you see the open plan that, we also saw this in Frank Lloyd Wright. And Frank Lloyd Wright was doing it earlier. And, Frank Lloyd Wright was known to the Europeans. It's hard to say exactly how much Frank Lloyd Wright directly influenced Mies van der Rohe, but they knew, the Europeans knew about Frank Lloyd Wright. He had traveled to Europe at some point early in his career. Dutch modernist Theo van Doesburg. This is kind of in the air in Europe in the before and after World War, especially after World War I, where the Bauhaus designers, architects, educators were stripping away all of the neoclassicism and getting things down to basics of geometry. And you also see this as black, white, and primary color. So down to the essentials. Really, they were just tearing architecture down to its most basic elements and using only those things. So basic geometry, basic color. Now this is not the greatest picture, but you can see where this rectilinear plan and the open floor plan, you can see it a little bit. I think this image needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but go back. There we go. You also can see where when you see something that has got so much so many, just like that is so thoroughly rectangular, when you do see a curve, it really stands out strongly. Okay. Projects that actually did get built. The Barcelona Pavilion. So the International Exposition in Barcelona in 1929, Mies van der Rohe and a woman named Lily Reich, who was a collaborator of his, who was really more the interior designer and a collaborator in furniture design. The two of them were in charge of this German pavilion. So an international exposition, like the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, like that one in 1893, and the 1889 Paris Exposition. This one is in Barcelona, and each nation creates a pavilion that represents the nation. And this one is the Germans, the German pavilion shows this very modern, which really amounts to a house. Mies van der Rohe really considered this kind of architecture to be the future of German architecture, not just in commercial building, but in residential building as well. The reflecting pool, big flat roof, travertine marble, that stone. You can see that marble on the side of the building. That's not an inexpensive material. That's not concrete. That's cut stone. So Mies van der Rohe was not an idealist like Gropius. He didn't necessarily believe that this needs to be made, low cost for the people. He was Mies van der Rohe was really more of a sculptor, because he made beauty. His concern was to make beautiful and rational spaces. So here you see the plan for the Barcelona Pavilion. Simple, open. One nod to tradition is that figurative sculpture that stands on the, stands sort of like looks like it's standing on a stone in the pool or in the reflecting pool. Chrome-plated, cross-shaped columns, and you see also the chrome-plated mullions on the windows. But those floor-to-ceiling windows, that's really, that's a really daring thing, especially for 1929. It was very hard for people to get used to the idea that those windows were stable, or that when you're inside, you feel exposed. So here's an interior view. And you see the Barcelona chair and stool. One partition wall that is clad with travertine. And like that, the pattern in the travertine marble looks beautiful. But again, the floor is concrete. The travertine is really there as a decorative element. That's as decorative as he gets. Barcelona chair. This is sort of a classic, like the chair of the 20th century, really. I'm sure some of you have seen it. I know from our presentation on Wednesday, some of you have seen it, and you know that it's ubiquitous, meaning it's kind of everywhere. And it is not it's not a cheap chair. You can buy it. Knoll International got permission in 1948 from Mies van der Rohe to manufacture this chair, and so they make an updated version. Originally, all of those panels of leather, those little squares of leather, were cut individually and sewn individually. Really more of a prototype. It's not done that way now. It's one big piece of leather that's sewn and buttoned. But you can see, like, if you go to a lobby of, lots of lobbies in Chicago, really everywhere, sooner or later, you're going to see this chair. It's comfortable. The pitch of it is very steep and can be hard to get out of, honestly. You got to use your core muscles to lift yourself out, or you kind of got to slide out or roll out sideways. The chair down to the lower right is a Marcel Breuer chair that also uses steel as a frame. And Marcel Breuer, Mies van der Rohe, there's another guy named Mart Stam in the Netherlands, and also Eileen Gray, who we looked at last time. They really experimenting with the possibilities of a steel tube or a steel bar as structure and not hiding it. Here, this is the Tugendhat house for a private client in what was called at the time Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, the city of Brno. That wall is ebony. So this is partially curved wall. So he was not opposed to a curve, but the geometry of it is it's rectangle, 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 and then this one big curve. This is an expensive house to build. But he did, Mies van der Rohe really pushed this idea that this is the future of living. There's the living room. And you see how much those windows, it's the idea of, making the difference between inside and outside as minimal as possible is very important. And here is from the outside. You see how it's really like the windows are part of the they're a part of the exterior wall, but they're not structural. The structure you can see is on the inside where those columns are, and that roof is projects out a little bit from the column. It's a cantilever, and it sort of gives it the idea that this the windows are just kind of like cut through the side of the building. And this house is still there. You can go visit it if you ever go to the Czech Republic. And the Farnsworth House. This is possibly his #1 project. in Plano, Illinois. You can go visit it if you want to. It is probably his most refined expression of modernist, like a single family home, which was really made for this Dr. Edith Farnsworth, with whom I believe he had an intimate relationship. But he designed this for her originally with no window treatments, because he didn't think that, he's like, you're out in the middle of nowhere, what do you need window treatments for? And she's like, yeah, you don't get it. So he eventually had to relent and have them included. But you can see the open plan. That lower rectangle is the so like that sort of plaza, or like I guess approach, and then the house is on the upper right, and you can see that really it's just like there's no it's just like you can just go around and around and around. Okay, so you can see the structure. There's some nice burly structure on the outside. So there are no columns that interrupt the living space. And of course, there's his furniture, the daybed, and the chairs. A little bit of ethnic pottery. Nice wood. I love that wood. This house has flooded a few times. It's close to the Fox River. And at the time, it was considered to be lifted up off the ground far enough from the river that it would never flood. But it's flooded twice, about halfway up the interior. It's had to be restored multiple times. Here's a nice classic, like a view of the kitchen from when it was built. I mean, it's nice. To me, I do like this kind of architecture. I don't live in this kind of architecture, but I appreciate it. It's like you can look at a photo and kind of feel what the space is like. And IIT. So Mies van der Rohe, he left Germany in the late 1930s. A lot, with the rise to power of Adolf Hitler and the National Socialists, also known as the Nazis. They were very ruthless in trying to get rid of everyone who was different. It wasn't just Jews, it was everybody. Jews had a specific, I guess they had a very specific hatred for them. But Mies van der Rohe, who had been apolitical, he really was not interested in choosing a political side. But because he had served as the director of the Bauhaus Institute for its last 2 years, really because Gropius went and begged him to do it, and he did. The Bauhaus was sort of known as having a pretty strong socialist ideology, really because they wanted social improvement through architecture and design. So Mies was kind of on the outs, and he was marginalized until he finally just gave up and left. He was late coming to the United States. Gropius had already secured the teaching job at Harvard, and Mies ended up in Chicago at the Armour Institute, which soon after became known as the Illinois Institute of Technology. And here is a collage of his plan for redevelopment of it with all modern buildings. And here they are. Crown Hall was kind of his big achievement. The truss structure that you see going over, like up and over the roof, that's what holds the building up. It's like the building kind of hangs off of it. So you can get this large interior span no columns interrupting it, because the structure is all on the outside and above. There are students working, with people also kind of walking around. And I mentioned, well, I've been there for a student, like they have like in the spring they have a student exhibition and open house, and Town Hall is big, and I can imagine that you got to concentrate if you're trying to make drawings. Okay, so he designed all the buildings. So this is the Minerals and Metal Research Building, boiler plant, chapel. I like the chapel. And if you don't take care of modern buildings, they start to look like this. This is like, air conditioning comes in, and he designed it right around the time air conditioning was just being developed. And so, if Mies isn't around, then it looks like people are going to do kind of whatever, which is too bad. You got to take care of things. Seagram Building. There's a shot of the lobby, and you can see like that the ground level. The building looks kind of like it's, you can see the columns around the ground, around the base of it. The building really seems like it's just sort of standing up over the ground. And you go into the lobby. Here, Four Seasons Restaurant, with the interior design by Philip Johnson. This is not Four Seasons Total Landscaping. And then here in New York also, the Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. This is an architecture firm that really took its cues from Mies and started to design tall buildings, tall office buildings. There's a great building in Chicago called the Inland Steel Building. One of the first, I think it's the first glass and steel high-rise in Chicago, and it's a beauty. They designed tall buildings like Sears Tower, Hancock Building. So they really got into the game here. So if you hear the abbreviation SOM, it's Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. They're still around. They employ interior designers and architects, because when you have a tall building like that and you have multiple clients, depending on how many floors you have, you don't have the same needs for all the clients. That's why the interior designer exists. All right, Mies van der Rohe, 860-880 Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. These are a pair of office buildings, a pair of residential high-rises. There they are under construction, kind of cool. So you see what the interior structure of the steel is really what is holding up the entire thing. There's a shot of the facade looking up. There's a Louis Sullivan. Sorry we didn't talk about Louis Sullivan. I feel badly for him. It's so always trying to find more time. But Louis Sullivan is an important Chicago architect. He was before Frank Lloyd Wright, contemporary of Burnham and Root, and also important for developing a specifically American style of architecture. All right, art photos of these Mies high-rises. You can see the mosaic, the tile ceiling and the recessed lighting. Cool shot of the from one building to the next. Barcelona chairs, what a surprise. And nice black and white photo from the 50s. big broad-leafed interior plants. Interior. So here's what it looks like if you've never been up there. Another interior view. Bedroom. Looks nice, doesn't it? This is like a leap to almost the present day. Maybe about 15 years ago, I believe this was completed. The Student Center at the Illinois Institute of Technology. This is sort of like this is Rem Koolhaas, who's a Dutch architect who is, kind of one of those love him or hate him kind of architects. But they designed this new student center at IIT. He did with a group of graduate students. The competition was graduate students and one star architect, and this project won. They wanted to put it right where the green line goes over this little empty, it was really just like an empty grass area. And so that tube is built around it to muffle the noise of the green line train going over. There's no station in there, it just runs through it. The station is a little farther south. But I really enjoy this. This is sort of like, where Mies is rational, this is kind of irrational. It looks kind of like the big tube was just set down on it and just kind of squishes it. A lot of interesting graphics. The wayfinding is really bizarre because they kept the paths through the building the same as the paths students use to cut across the grass to different buildings. So it's a very chaotic interior. I kind of enjoy it, though. But it's kind of weird. So you go from rational to weird. And that's kind of like what happened after, like when you get past modernism, which we're not going to get to modern, like we're not going to get to postmodern just yet, but soon. And yeah, there's an interior shot from some visit I made to it years ago. The surface of like the ceiling panels, like that's like gypsum board that's just left. They covered the like the screw holes from where there was like screwed to the structure, and that's kind of a pattern. Yeah, it's as I say, it's kind of a love it or hate it kind of a building, but very interesting. All right, and that is that. That is your. That is Mies van der Rohe and International Style.